Hi, how's everybody tonight? Hello, Alicia, how are you? Arlene, oh, we got quite a few people on here ready to learn about the worms. So I think I'm going to get started here. I want to first thank Farm and Food Care Ontario for having us on their little program, the package that they've got going on. It's a really neat, informative series they've got going. I'm Dan Lizmore, and I'm the chief worm wrangler at the Western Fair District's Wormery. I'll show you the sign here. Make things fairly legit. And now what I'm going to do is start in on a little bit of an talk over on everything we're doing and why we're doing stuff here. About 18 months ago, we decided that we saw an opportunity to eliminate a lot of our waste streams, a lot of our green waste, by using it in compost blends and using it as a fertilizer on our garden beds. And then as we continued on this, we had a lot of people coming forward looking to help us. I apologize for the glare off my head. I can't do much. I should have wore a wig or something tonight, I guess. But we saw that opportunity to do that, to run the compost program out across London a little bit bigger. So now we're to the point where we're bringing in some compost from around bistros. We've got some factories involved. We've got a lot of restaurants involved. Things are good. So what we do is we break down the food, feed it to the worms, and thereby we can kind of eliminate some green waste and make you some nice fertilizer for your gardens. So let me get right into the business here. I'm going to turn the camera around so I can do a little bit better job of showing you what's going on. So bear with me here. See if we can get it to a view that doesn't look at me. Perfect. Oh, now we're in business. So what we've got here is these are our tables that we use for our process. These are called flow-through tables. What happens is the worms themselves actually live in the top couple inches of the compost. So if you can take a peek here, pull this back. Look at those girls. You can kind of see them in there. There's just a pile of them everywhere in here. They seem to quite enjoy the food that we're feeding them. So yeah, so you get a bunch of those. So what happens is we put compost, the well-rotted compost, onto the top of these tables. The worms eat the compost, and as the compost feeds through the tables, it comes out the bottom as a kind of an unprocessed blend that's got just about everything in it. It's got newspapers, it's got big chunks of compost. It's actually got a lot of worms in it too still at this point. Then we take that after that process, there's some sifting that's involved to get the stuff to work down to a nice fine grade where you can use it around your house. So let me take a peek here at what I was going to talk about next. The feed itself, like I say, we get contributors who provide the stuff to us. The food comes in just like this. And you've got different things like your eggshells. You've got straw from a couple of horse farms that we deal with. Everything from in town here. We've got a couple of factories, as I said. Live Fit Foods is one of those. And this stuff turns into this stuff after about 10 to 12 weeks of sitting in the composter and getting some good heat going. It's called thermophilic composting. And it does just a great job of getting the stuff ready for the worms. And in turn, the worms themselves give us the castings. So that's halfway across the room here. I'll have to go over there and take a look at that one. These tables actually are designed to catch leachate, which is a fluid kind of like a worm pee, for lack of a better word. Pretty nasty looking stuff, but pretty good when you mix it down and dilute it as a fertilizer, as a liquid fertilizer. It requires quite a bit of mixing down, about 4 to 1 or so. And there's finished castings right there. So that's the product that we're trying to achieve. And you can see it's got little worm eggs in there. It's just about got everything in it. But it's a really good product for around your gardens. So I apologize if I'm walking too briskly or making anyone motion sick or anything like that. But when you're on a mission, you got to do what you got to do. So the next portion of it is the bedding. Now, the bedding we add as a type of moisture control. We also have contributors who do this stuff too, who provide this stuff to the process. This is really fine shredded newsprint over here. And this is a much rougher or coarser material that we actually pre-treat when we add it to the composters. And it just acts as a source of carbon for the process. And worms will actually eat this paper as well. So that's kind of a bonus too. So it gives you a little bit of the carbon in your situation. So what we usually do on these tables, worms can eat about half their weight every day So what we do is about every week we feed about 80 pounds. The worm's favorite thing to eat, Tamara, is actually probably watermelons and muskmelons and cantaloupes. They go just crazy for that stuff. We get a lot of that from Live Fit Foods. They tend to put some really healthy ingredients in there, which the worms seem to be pretty keen on. So that's pretty good. We need that food disappearing quickly. So the bedding, the water. What we do to get the water figured out, this is our beautiful water tank. You see we got a little mermaid stuck on the front of it. It's a definite indicator that it's water in there. We put chlorinated water into the tank, and then it's allowed to sit there for about 24 hours to dechlorinate. The worms apparently don't like the chlorine in the water. We haven't had any issues with that situation, but we don't want to either. So it works out pretty good that we treat the water first. Now, what we do in order to harvest these tables is you get underneath of them, and as the worms eat the castings themselves migrate down through the table, and you can see all this stuff here. The bottom of the tables is porous, and in that respect, we're able to kind of comb the bottom of the tables and just get off the castings, and that's what this process here is. Then we go over here to this absolutely lovely contraption in the corner. This is our sifting machine. And by reciprocating motion, this machine is able to sift down castings from that large clumpy mess that you saw over there into the much finer stuff that you had seen over there in the bag. That's the stuff that's available for purchase. And it is just amazing stuff. It's sifted through an 1/8-inch screen. So let me go over here. It goes through an 1/8-inch screen. How much a worm weighs? That's a really good question. I wouldn't give him too much credit for weighing very much. Let me see. See these little guys? I don't want to be mean to them, but these little compost worms, these red wrigglers, they're called Icenia fetida. I don't know if it's a very clear image or not. Better than looking at my forehead, though. That's them. They're called Icenia fetida is the Latin name of these. And these are a red wriggler or a tiger worm. And they're a perfect little compost worm. They're not a fishing worm. You could probably use them to fish if you wanted to. But in actuality, they're very small. They really do just feed on leaf litter and things like that out in the environment. So fantastic for the exact job that we're doing. So now what we've got is I was going to show you some of the uses of the stuff. This stuff is fantastic. You can add it to existing plants. You can add it to a tea, which is literally just putting it into a sock, putting it into a pail, and then letting it sit overnight. And the stuff will make a very, very rich fertilizer for a foliar spray or for a nice root watering. Also, you can use that leachate that I had shown you earlier, the really dark fluid. And that stuff, once again, needs to be mixed down quite a bit, honestly, because it can be quite acidic on your plants. It can do surface damage on your plants. Pretty cool stuff, though. Yeah, that's back to the watering. Yes, the worm beds, Kimberly, do definitely have to be kept wet. What we have is a humidity detector over here that's in one of the tables. We have to, for breeding and for them to survive and to eat and everything, we do need to keep the moisture levels around 70% plus or minus. Currently, we do that with this little device. But usually what we do is just go along to the tables, and if you can squeeze a drop of water out of the filler material in the tables, then you've got them pretty good. They don't have to be too wet, and you can't actually sift the material. We've run into all these problems as far as dry or wet. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of checking the water on these things. And then also you can mix this stuff in with just about any type of plants, indoor plants, outdoor plants, the whole 9 yards. So she's good for just about every application. And now what I was going to do is show you guys real quick how we can make ourselves. Sorry, I'm trying to switch my camera around. I'm clearly not very savvy with this stuff. So there we go. Now here's the thing. You guys can actually do your own worm farm if you want to. And it takes these worms are amazing. They're very, very resilient. All you need is 3 totes. This is how the whole wormery started, is these exact totes right here that you see. So we've got totes. Now I got to switch back to my back camera again. You have to bear with me. The production value, I tell you. All right, here we go. We're going. We're turning. Now we're talking. So what we've got is I've got these 3 totes. Measuring the herd. That's a great question, Alicia. The way we measure the herd, usually you can assume you've got 1.5 pounds of worms per square foot. That's usually what these type of tables will tolerate as far as population. Worms themselves are self-regulating. They'll kind of fill the space that's available based on the food and the resources that are available to them. But as you can see, you can go to almost any table and find them. And you get into about, there we go. See, there's a whole bunch right there. So you're looking at about 1 pound to 1.5 pounds of worms per square foot on a table. And that amounts to about 500 worms per pound. And we've got about 22 tables on the go right now that are all about 30 square feet in size. So we're sitting on a lot of worms. We've got to be well over 1 million now. And we feed the worms this compost. So the tables are actually really packed. Like the population is very, very high, because we're actually trying to produce some material. So I am led to believe that the worms are supposed to live for a long time. These worms, I think, have a lifespan of about 2 or 3 years. I think I read somewhere. I'll have to do some look into that one. It's a good question. And no, we have no trouble keeping them healthy. These worms, when we do the sifting process, the worms actually come right down through the table. They end up in the stuff that's on the floor. The stuff on the floor has to dry for a couple of days. So these worms actually live on the floor for a couple of days. Then the material gets sifted. The poor worms get shook around a bit. Then they go back into the table with all their buddies again. Probably have quite a story to tell them. So yeah, good lifespan for these things. We don't have to ever replace them. They just continue to replace themselves quite a bit. So, but yeah, so there's your uses. I'll go back over here to my DIY spot. I should have spread this out a little bit further in the basement. We're always looking for more food contributors. We can always use more food contributors. In town, we've got a few people who are requesting. We'd like to start some kind of a compost collection program in this area of town, but it's kind of tough with the way things are right now. But I'm sure we'll be able to pull that together pretty soon. So, okay, so back to it here. I'll show you this DIY here. So you've got a 3-tote system right here. You got to drill your little holes in the bottom of 2 of your totes. And then the bottom one has to still be watertight, but it's good to have a spigot on it because you are going to have that leachate coming out of there. So you put a hole in there. This way you can actually let the moisture out of the bin. You've got to have a bit of a bedding layer, and that's where your coconut coir or your shredded newspaper can come in. And this stuff here just rehydrates this coconut, and it is just a great bedding for the worms to live around in. It's a fairly neutral situation for them, not a food product. And then all you got to do is just add your worms, add a little bit of your food source and a little bit of your bedding source, and keep them fairly moist. The biggest problem people get into with these home worm systems is that they get a little bit too wet. Let's move out of the light here. That's a very shiny head. So they really get, some people get their systems just a bit too wet. I think that's the main problem with these. But if you can keep it dry and keep it maintained, you're off and running. You'll be eliminating green waste. We'd love to help you eliminate green waste. If you want to look at getting rid of some, you can get in touch with us at the Wormery, or check us out on the website at thegrovewfd.com. Pet food waste? Like, I would assume so. We tend to not give the worms any oils, greases, dairies, or meats, just because those tend to really rot in the bins and they tend to get rough. And the worms just don't tend to appreciate them as much as they appreciate the plant products. So we've had a lot more luck with just using green waste. Specifically, you gotta get your green waste really buried down in there, because the fruit flies, even with our compost, you can see around here there's fly tape hanging off almost every post, and there's not that many flies. It's just that we really got to watch that. They really tend to, the flies tend to like everything the worms like. So, and you can see like a raccoon's tail. So yeah, make sure you bury your food products in your table and you'll be in better shape if you're using like kitchen waste at your house, if you don't have the option of breaking it down. So that's about the whole production. That's us in here. We're worming it up every darn day of the week. And I'd be more than happy to answer any other questions that anybody might have. I'm not sure how I go about getting into questions, but You can actually get these worms. You don't want to dig them up because what you can dig them up. I shouldn't say you don't want to dig them up. You absolutely can dig worms up, but a lot of the worms that are actually native to Canada or that are living around in Canada are not compost worms. These night crawlers and earthworms and things, they tend to live in the soil layers down 18 to 20 to 24 inches. And as you see, you just don't have that kind of a depth on the worm table. And they eat slightly different food stuff. They don't go for the rich top layer food. But you can honestly get worms just about anywhere online, including at the Western Fair here at the Wormery in the basement at the Grove. And we'll send it out in a fancy, there's a new thing we've just got. I'm going to walk across the room again. If you order your worms from us, you get them in a fancy live worm Chinese food takeout container. Now that's living right there. So yeah, but if you want to, once again, you can go on the Grove WFD, and that's where those can be ordered in a home composting situation. I personally compost it because it really does keep it keeps the flies down. You can compost if you have the opportunity or the ability to compost it. Now here's the other thing too. We don't tend to compost our compost all the way through here. We tend to compost it to the point when it starts to drop in temperature, when it gets past the hot point. And then that's when it's still a little bit funky, and we feed it to the worms at that point in time. So at home, you could go through quite a bit. Preventing fruit flies, once again, really just burying. It's just about burying. The fruit flies are only attracted to the food stuff. They're not attracted to the worms. They couldn't care about the bins. They just want to get at the food stuff. So that stuff I showed you in the pail earlier on is going to be probably a disaster by morning if I don't take it out of here with me. So I'm going to take it out of here with me. But that's your best way to keep fruit flies out, is just to stay away from fruit and vegetables as best you can, or make sure they're well buried. So once again, here, I'll show you the vegetables. Yes. How long I'm not even going to kid you. I wasn't a worm enthusiast. I've been a worm enthusiast, I would say, for 18 months. And then my wife would tell you that it bordered on an obsession because I wanted to get fairly good at it. And there's a lot of people on the internet who have so much knowledge and so much capacity to learn this stuff. And we started really, really, really slow and really, really small. Like with manual, this is a manual sifter right here. Gave the old arms a workout on that thing for quite a while. And then we got automated. So yeah, the worm enthusiasm has come up ever since the automation started to come up in here too. So, and now I would argue that we're borderline good at worms now. So release red. Yeah, you can. Yeah, they can go outside for sure. And in fact, there's red wrigglers already all over the place out there. They're a fairly common worm. They're worldwide. You can totally release them outside. They'll be fine. They either will or won't overwinter. They usually find themselves a little warm nook to hibernate or to get some sleep for the winter. But yeah, you can let them go. Stay in the top layer of the bin in the fresh fruit and bedding. When I look at my bin, they're all at the bottom. Oh, well, I don't know what that's all about. I don't know how often you're feeding them. They also tend to like the moisture, so they will gravitate away from dry areas. And I'm not sure if your stuff is dry or what's going on. We've also found them, if you get something like onions or citrus or something where there's just too much of one nutrient in one area, the worms will actually try to climb right out of the bin. Like they'll wriggle right up and out of the bin. They want nothing to do with it. They'll get out of there. So we've come in the mornings and found a couple on the floor here and there. And the only real reason could be that there was something in the bin that they didn't like. So, but yeah, that's what I would look for, is too much moisture or just too much of any type of food in one spot. We are going to start doing on-site tours. And in fact, we've got a bit of a plan with a couple of our compost contributors that we would really like to be able to bring not only kids groups, but adults. We're partnered up this year with Friends of Urban Agriculture London, and we're going to be hopefully doing tours of an outside garden. Once everything gets going and Uncle Doug Ford lets us back around again, I could see us doing guided tours of the Wormery, having you kind of get your hands dirty with us, enjoy the fruit flies that we really don't have right now. So I'd love if municipalities, honestly, this is the kind of thing where everybody can get on board with this thing. I see no reason that you couldn't have that. It'd be fantastic to. Cities have all these abandoned buildings. That's exactly what this is based on. This is just in a great big abandoned building in the basement of the fair. And it was a storage area, and now it's just mostly for worms to live. So that's pretty good. And I think most municipalities have an empty spot like this. So yeah, I think it would be great. I'm not sure. How far away are you? We probably ship a worm just about as far as they live for the trip. So, or you can come down here and see one of our guided tours once those get going. But yeah, and the thing is too, with shipping the worms, it's probably better to ship them a little bit less. But the good news is there's all kinds of different worm farms all over. A lot of the stuff we've gotten is from Kathy's Composters originally, and that's up in Innisfil Barrie area. She's really good. She's a leader in this whole entire situation of vermicomposting. But there's also places around. There's a couple in Tillsonburg. There's a bunch of wormeries around where you can order from online. There's quite a few resources. So we're not the only one, but we'll let you believe it. So yeah, anybody else got anything to throw at me? You wonder how I keep this thing looking so good? Yes, they actually process the compost is kind of a threefold situation, possibly two. We started breaking down the compost because the fruit fly situation, when you have this many tables, can really get away from you. You don't have to pre-compost it. Also, they say that the worms can pass the stuff through their gut much quicker because it's already been digested by things like fungus and bacteria and the stuff that's in the soil, all the aerobic bacteria that they're dealing with in there. So by the time the composted food gets to the worms, it's already been half composted. So it's very easy for their gut to break down. And I find that it gives us a much quicker return on product. We can harvest these tables usually twice a week, as I'd said. And that's good because then there's more revenue coming in, allowing us to make the process just a bit better. Hopefully get some more contributors, keep it moving. So market value of sifted processed. I don't know what the market value is, but I know we're selling the stuff for about $12 for a 5-liter bag and $20 for a 10-liter. The values of castings vary considerably, but part of the problem you'll get into is some of the cheaper castings. And I'm not suggesting that anyone has cheaper castings that are not up to the task, but some castings come from across the sea and stuff where they're actually feeding the worms. There's different food stocks that you can use. People can use like animal waste instead. We don't have any animal waste in ours, but we do have straw. So there may be a little bit of waste to it. But as far as market value goes, you want to look for a good product where the worms are fed a fairly steady, good diet of feedstock, not just turned over junk and twigs and stuff. You really want to have a good feedstock. So compost. We actually don't have any bulking. There's no bulking agents in our stuff at all. It's all just green waste with a lot of like shredded newspaper is mixed. I would say that's maybe the bulking agent, but it's more of a source of carbon to allow the composting to work well. So, but no bulking agents on our end. The worms are eating exactly all the stuff you just saw in those pails. And there's days when I wish they didn't, because I'm telling you, the composting process can get away from you a little bit. So, but it's kind of the way that we do it. So I see on your site, you have castings tested. Yes, we actually send, it's a legal thing. You, by law in Canada, have to have these things tested in batch tests. Our castings and our compost go in for testing. They've been in a couple of times now. It's A&L Labs in London who does our testing. And a lot of that stuff, I honestly don't know how to read the test results, but I know that we're in really good shape for nutrients. We're in really good shape for things like heavy metals. It checks for things like E. coli and some of those type of things, some negative aspects of the compost too. So yeah, the testing's good. We've got the results there. If someone can read them and put them into layman's terms, I'd love to know what they're all about. But I've been told by nurseries that they're very good, so that's good. Any other questions on that? Not a bad tour. Nice, good, fantastic. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I hope I didn't muddy the waters too much on vermicomposting. And thanks for joining me for a lovely evening in the basement, everyone.